Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Criminal Justice Natters with me, Ed Johnston. This evening, I'm joined by the Twitter handle, The Secret Defendant. Some of you may follow her. Krista, The Secret Defendant, has a ridiculous tale to tell us of the state of criminal justice in England and Wales. I hope you find the talk interesting. So let's get right to it. Hi, Krista. Thanks for joining me this evening. I'm very excited to hear about your case. I've been following you on Twitter for a number of years, and it was extremely pleasing to see a happy-ish resolution to your ordeal. As we get started, for those who might be listening or watching that don't necessarily know about your case, could you take us right back to the beginning and sort of tell me what happened?
So I was arrested in January 2017 in a nice dawn raid by HMRC. 14 officers accusing me of cheating the public revenue, money laundering and fraud by false representation to the tune of around 550, 580k, but the numbers did fluctuate. So
okay. And so that happened in 2017. We're now in November 2023.
The end, and it was the beginning of 2017, like literally the beginning, January, and now we're literally at the end of 2023. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a long ride.
What happened in that? What was the next step after you were arrested?
After I was arrested, I was bailed initially. They said it was unconditional bail, but I did a passport surrender. And then I was asked to return back to a police station in April. I was bailed to return to the police station. But then I got back to the police station and it was closed and nobody was there. This happened for a couple more times, different police stations that weren't expecting us and couldn't facilitate us. The prosecution didn't turn up for any of these appearances, which was quite interesting. Every time a letter had been lost in the post, they said, or they'd forgotten, oh, we thought we told you once. That, okay, my solicitor was quite firm that they hadn't told us, but okay. But that was to be the theme of the entire 7 years. If I knew then what I know now. From that, we played sort of Bailgate for a little while, what I call Bailgate. And then eventually we all arrived for a second interview at end of April 2017. After that, I didn't hear anything. I was released again. I didn't hear anything back from anybody until randomly I got a letter in the post one day in November of 2017 telling me that I was now released under investigation and that I could have my passport back because I wanted to go on holiday and stuff with the kids. So obviously I worked hard, so the kids hadn't had a break that year. I'd also had a mini stroke in October 2017. So I really was grateful to have my passport back at that time just to get away for a few days because we really needed it.
Yeah.
And then I didn't hear anything from them again until I got a call out of the blue in February 2020. So a good 2.5 years later, 3 years later, when I suddenly got a call from my solicitor announcing that I was going to be charged. The other person who I'm not going to talk about, but there was another person involved in this. He wasn't going to be charged, but I don't want to go into all that. So he wasn't going to be charged and I was, and it was very sudden because I was just like driving home from work. I had people in my car. Like news, you live in your life, you have to kind of manage a day-to-day life. But one of the hardest things about this is unprecedented things just pop up.
Yeah.
And then to cope with that in real life, like in front of people, or you're trying to manage this huge realm of emotions going on internally, your brain's going, you can't really talk about it there and then normally. I've never been able to talk about things as they've happened. I've had to not even be able to talk about it for 12 hours, maybe sometimes if I've been at work or stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite hard to internalize all that. So it was a shock. It was a real shock. I was traumatized.
So if we could just go back to the sort of raid and the subsequent arrest, what happened in the police station? Did you get defense representation in the police station?
No. So the arrest was really horrible. I feel like it was Totally. I mean, I personally feel like, and I know now I've been vindicated and found not guilty, so my name has been cleared. I personally feel like I should never have been arrested in the first place. They had no reason to do that. They could have rung me and said, like, can we have a meeting? Like, you know, like we were in constant communication. So how it became that, and the level of force used, the type of arrest. I'm a mum at the end of the day. I just live at home with my kids. My grandchildren live here. For 14 men to burst through a door, like I don't find that proportionate to no. even if I was guilty, I still don't find that proportionate. You know, like I watched Lucy Letby get a really civilized arrest at her front door. Yeah, I had 14 officers like burst through my bedroom door and drag me out my bed. Like, I don't find that a proportionate for the, especially for a white collar crime, etc. You know, that stuff like that. So that was horrific in itself. I didn't want a solicitor because I was because we had this back history, so this other stuff had gone on that we'd already been resolving. I had nothing to hide, so I was quite happy to talk. I thought, to be honest with you, and I've said this throughout, I thought they're going to realise their mistake. You know, like they can't be this stupid. You know, like this can't be actually happening. I don't know if it was shock or it wasn't, because we all knew the truth, obviously. But yeah, so there was a bit of like disbelief at the time. I just thought I'd go. I was thinking, all right, just tell the truth. They're going to go away. They're going to realise, okay, we shouldn't have really done this. And that's all I thought would happen, to be honest with you. And yeah, obviously, as we know now, it didn't go like that. So yeah.
So you were expecting them to realise that there's been a mess up somewhere
immediately. I told them at the point of my arrest, like, you're going to really realise. Like, I said, you need to, and I've told them that I've been in constant communication with this particular agent, blah, 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 blah. And then I've seen since when I've seen all the evidence in the unused, there's a call log of the senior investigator to this particular officer at the time that I was in custody, no less, saying, this person's calling your name, and I don't want this conversation on email comms. Can you ring me so we can just talk over the phone? So that already speaks volumes. You know, like they were already worried at 9:30 in the morning, and I'd only been there since 6:30. You know, like and yeah, so it was I didn't know that obviously all that was going on behind the scenes. I just went in and just told the truth. Like, I never thought telling the truth would be so hard. I'll be honest.
So that idea around sort of telling the truth, nothing to hide, that they're going to realize a mistake, did that influence your decision to not have legal advice?
Yeah, 100%. I didn't think I needed legal advice. I didn't have anything to hide. I knew I was telling the truth. I knew I could easily prove I was telling the truth. Like, it was so evident, like, throughout, that nobody could believe it had happened. Like, we were all kind of like, what? Like, what, really? Like, what? Like, everyone, because it couldn't have been further from the polar opposite, if that made sense. So everyone was kind of just like, oh, they're going to realise their mistake. And at first I believed everybody, but then when everybody was still saying it to me after 2 years, I was thinking to myself, okay, but maybe they're not, because we're still here, you know, like 2 years later. So I started getting really irritated with people when they said that to me, because at that point you kind of get stuck in this loop, and nobody can really understand what it's like when you've been falsely accused of something if you haven't done the crime. I think it's one of those life experiences that you really have to experience to actually understand. Because people don't think it could happen to them. They must think you know, like, they could be a base, but anything could happen to anyone. You know, as I wrote in the letter to Alex Chalk, like, you could be accused of anything at any time. You know, it could happen to anyone. And I think that was the most shocking thing about it all, to be honest with you.
So with this idea that, you know, obviously it could happen to anyone, with everything that you've been through, do you think that all these experiences that you might have taken legal advice in the first interview if you had to go through this again, do it all again? Or do you not think that would have made no difference at all?
No, because I was telling the truth, and I knew I was telling the truth. So why would I need to pay a lawyer thousands of pounds to sit there next to me to tell them, like, for me to still talk? I had nothing to hide. I never ever thought of going no comment. And it was interesting because actually when I did get legal advice, my solicitor said they would have told me to go no comment. And I was like, but why? Because to me, if you go no comment, like, what have you got to hide? Like, if you're telling the truth, anyone who's telling the truth will be happy to tell you that they're telling the truth. To me, that's logical. I've since learned that not everybody thinks like that, which, so, you know, like, through my own journey like this, But I'm very like, just tell the truth. And so, no, I wouldn't have changed my decision. No, definitely not. I think my solicitor wishes I changed my decision. But he actually said, when he read my interviews, that he said, you've been consistent throughout. Like, you told the truth from the very beginning. You've been consistent throughout, you know, like, because it's the truth. You can't, if it's the truth, it's the truth. It's that simple. You know, it's as simple as that, to be honest.
So tell me about this experience of being RUI'd, because this obviously is, you know, was a relatively new sort of thing to assist the police, make it easier to bail suspects. There's no restrictions for the suspect, but there's no time limits either.
There's no restrictions for the people throwing you on RUI either. It's to me, there's no restrictions either, no matter which side of the party you are. For the prosecuting bodies, whether they're civil service, like in my case, or whether it's a police force, in the majority of cases, I would imagine. Personally, it's a good loophole, right? It's a big black hole. You can just throw people in it. Oh, released under investigation. Okay, but who's investigating? How long is the investigation going to take? When are the review points? Where's your decision-making process? Why is nobody overseeing these? Like, why is your department heads or your auditors, because I'm sure all of these people are regularly audited, like, why is nobody pulling this up? Like, where's this? Like, I don't understand. And the RUI, like, you know, people talk about the Crown Court lists and the magistrate backlogs and stuff like that. Like, the RUI backlog, have you seen the numbers on RUI? Like, there's something else. They're like a whole 3 countries, you know, like, they're astonishing. So, you know, like, people moan about Crown Court and magistrates, but actually RUI is like huge amounts of people. And magistrates as well, like the 65K for Crown Court is one stat, but it's like 500,000 plus, right, for magistrates, something. I mean, that's insane. It's insanity.
It's around about sort of 350, 400,000. Nevertheless, a massive amount.
That's insanity. That is insanity. The numbers are insane. And RUI is RUI is like very handy loophole for legal people, I'm sure, prosecuting bodies, because there is no end date, so they can take as long as they want. They don't, I feel like they don't communicate back. You can email, and I think that's one of the hardest things. There's no obligation for them to communicate back with you, and I think that that's really wrong, because it can be really frustrating. Like, not knowing is probably like the worst thing. I think if I'd been told in 2017, oh, we're going to charge you, but it's not going to happen until blah, 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 and you have an end date, but you just don't know. So you're like in limbo. You can't make plans. When you're on RUI, you can't make plans because you literally don't know if and when you're going to get charged. You wake up every day like, is it going to be today? Am I going to hear something today? You try not to, because life has to go on. Like, you have to, but RUI is when my worst experience in this, mental health wise, was in the middle of my RUI in 2019. I feel like once court started, as frustrating as it's been and the charge process has been, there has been like accountability, there has been dates, there has been judges, there has been things where people have had to reply, you know, like, even if it takes a little minute. But RUI, there's none of that. You're just like so I think I wrote on Twitter a few times, I felt like a goldfish swimming in the Atlantic, because you don't know which way the current's going to go. You don't know if you're going to get eaten by a shark. You don't know how long you're going to have to swim for. It's horrible. It's like, it's a real, again, unless you experience it, like, you just, I'm sure you've spoken to plenty of people on RUI doing your own work. Like, it's quite a soul destroying experience. And I feel like just because you're accused of something, or you're in a frame to be accused of something, doesn't mean you can be treated like that. Defendants and anybody that's been accused of anything automatically are treated like they're the lowest of the low. And the innocent until proven guilty thing is completely the other way around. That's been my experience anyway. And RUI was very much like that. Like, look, we've accused you and we'll tell you stuff when we're ready. And if we don't want to tell you stuff, we won't, you know, like, and it was very much about the control. The prosecuting bodies, it's like they enjoy having that control. And I think where it gets dangerous is there's no accountability, there's no independent. And what happens is, if it's getting reviewed from in-house, anything that's bad that's getting reviewed in-house is never going to be a good review, in my experience. You need independent people to look at things. So yeah, that's, RUI is not the greatest experience in the world.
No, there's an absolute sort of, you know, complete lack of any kind of scrutiny around this, and as you say, the numbers of suspects currently on RUI is hideous. So whilst there's no check-ins that the police regularly have to check in with you, that there's no time frames, and as you've said, you were 2.5 years on RUI, is that right?
I was on RUI from November 17 officially when I got the letter until February 20. So yeah, roughly 2.5 years.
2.5. Yeah. Did you or your sort of legal team chase for updates around this, and what was the sort of what was the response from the police there? Or
zero? I got none at email. All. None. I got one email back at 3 o'clock in the morning from one of the officers in my case. Like, which civil servant sends an email at 3 o'clock in the morning? I read it and I thought, did you hope no one will see that you sent it? Like, I don't understand. Was what happened to me burning your soul at 3 o'clock in the morning? I hope so. But he emailed back once and said that it should be done in the next 6 months or so. But he hoped. They said it was interesting because the HMRC said very early on that they'd passed it to the CPS and they were waiting for the CPS to make a decision. But then 2-3 years later, they said they were still investigating, so I was like, okay, but haven't you finished the investigation? Isn't it that why it went to the CPS for them to look at the evidence and make? It was almost to me like, okay, the CPS said, oh, there's not really a lot here. Go back. Like, what else can you find? Like absolutely. That's how it felt, because why would it get passed to them and then it goes back to be an investigation? To me, I thought I'm just a mere mortal. I'm not a legal expert. Maybe by definition after this case a little bit more expert, but by default. But I feel like, to me, the CPS is whoever's investigating, they get their evidence and they go to the CPS, they present it and say, can we make a charge stick or not? The CPS then look at the evidence and say, yes, you can, or no, you can't. They're not supposed to go back and say, oh, well, it's not quite strong enough. Like, go back and see, like, I feel that actively the CPS worked with my prosecution team. Like, this is a fact. And I don't think that's right, because I thought the CPS was supposed to be the impartial people that decided, Yeah. But I might be wrong. I don't know. Maybe my perception is wrong.
So we're RUI'd for 2.5 years. There's back and forth between the police and CPS in terms of case construction, building a case against you. Tell me about when you were charged. So that came.
I heard in February 2020 that I was being charged, but then my charges, of course, a pandemic hit, so life affected everybody differently. Yeah, so things changed, and I didn't actually get my charges until September 2020. That's when they arrived, and that period was really horrible because they said it would take a few weeks, but they didn't say it would take 9 months, and I kind of got into this like strange little ritual of OCD ritual of patting, sort of a little prayer every time I opened my letterbox when I came home at night, really random. And then my solicitor said to me, like, don't worry, they're going to come to me first. So I'll get them first and I'll let you know. Of course, they didn't send them to him first. They sent them to me in the post, and he didn't get them until the day after by email, of course. So I came home from work again, like completely out of the blue, and just opened my post. And the one day I kind of didn't think about them. Of course, they were there. This big A4 envelope. It was like this sort of thick. It looked quite menacing.
Yeah.
It's not a letter anybody, like when you see a letter like that, you're going to go, in your postbox, what's that? Like it's not a birthday card.
It's not a birthday card, no.
You already know. And then I saw the CPS stamp on it, and I came upstairs and I had to put them down, and it took me like an hour before I could even mentally prepare myself, because I had to come home. At that point, my son was like 17. He was a lot younger. And he had stuff going on. I had to come in like I'm a mum. So when you come in, the cat wants feeding, the kids want feeding, like my life's normal like everybody else. So you don't just have a moment to sort of take in the enormity of what you have to digest. It just doesn't go like that. So it was later on that evening that I actually opened it. And I just remember looking at it and feeling like in complete disbelief, like I just was like, what? There was one sentence in there that the prosecutor had written that stood out to me from the whole pack. And he wrote that he found it incredible to believe that a woman of my intelligence and acumen had no idea that this was going on behind my back, and that I'm basically just using the other person as an excuse. And that really stuck out to me, because it's absolutely true. It is bloody incredible. Like, I absolutely had no idea. And my anger at myself was absolutely real. So that one sentence, to me, the whole case was just based on presumption that this guy found it incredible Like, look at the facts clearly state for themselves. So that to me was like a very profound sentence, you know, like in the thousands of pages that I read. And there was quite a few profound statements like that where literally they were just built on presumption as opposed to fact. Nothing was actually factual. And it was frightening. It followed after I got charged. I was in magistrates within a month. So that actually, when I got charged for that first initial 3 months, it moved quite quickly because I went to magistrates within a month. I had to present myself at magistrates. I was told by my legal team it was just going to be, is it indicted when it's sent to court? I think that's the right word.
Yeah.
So it was going to be indicted, and I was told I didn't need to enter my pleas. And I found that quite interesting because I was very keen to enter my pleas. And to the point that at the end, when I was asked, has anyone got anything to say? I said, yes, I want to enter my pleas and I want it on record. And the judge kind of looked at me and said, no problem. What do you want to, like, what's your pleas? And I said, I plead not guilty to all charges. And I found that quite interesting because my barristers team were like, oh, it doesn't matter. You can plead at Crown. It doesn't count. To me, it would count because what if the Crown Court judge says, what did she plead at magistrate? When did she put her pleas in? Did she think, I'm not thinking about this. I had nothing to think about. I knew I wasn't guilty. So I put my pleas in at magistrates. And I think my barrister then realised, okay, we're going to have to handle this case like she might be telling the truth at this point. maybe she's actually innocent because obviously they don't know, you know, like, and I get it, it's their job. Anyone could walk away and laugh or whatever. But both of them said that they took my case on because it was an important case and what had happened to me was awful and it was wrong, very wrong. And I know that they were both genuinely pleased that I won, you know, like they knew that justice had prevailed and ultimately that's what they do their job for, right? So when the charge came, I did put my pleas in and then I went to Crown Court, I think about 6 weeks later for my first appearance. The judge was quite horrible to me, so I told him off and told him, I tried to tell him, don't look at me like that and speak to me in that tone of voice. But what I actually said, genius line of the trial, A1, don't look at me in that tone of voice. That's I can't, it was a genius moment. But my barrister was just like at the end of his row, like I saw his breath intake sharply. But the judge was like, well, it's not merely me who finds you guilty. You're not guilty anyway. I said, I will prove that I didn't do this. And because what happened was when I went in, he was quite nice. And then as the charges were read out, I watched his body language physically change. And then he looked at me like up and down. And he looked at me contemptuously. Like there's no two ways about it. I'm a grown up. I know when someone looks at you, you know, like it was what it was. And I found that really offensive because, again, like stop presuming that I'm guilty just because I'm here. Like, it's not always people are not. If you take the Pareto principle, which is something I often talk about, 80-20, whatever it is, the 80-20 Pareto principle, like if you take 20% of the people and cross all the numbers that are probably not guilty like me, that's like 13,000 people in the Crown Court list that are probably not guilty, could quite possibly not be guilty. You know, that's a lot of people. It would reduce the queues dramatically, you know? So, I feel like cross-judge was a bit cross that day, and I feel like that was wrong because he didn't know like if I was guilty or not. I'd just been presented in front of him, and I feel wrong attitude to have perhaps for somebody that you don't know.
So you were charged September 2020. Initial stages moved quite quickly, and within a relatively short period, you were presented to the Magistrates Court. But obviously, we're now November 2023, and this is final. What this ended? 2 months ago? 6 weeks ago?
Yeah, a month ago. October,
1 month.
Yeah, October the 8th. It was finished.
Before we get
to due to start trial yesterday. It was my fourth listed trial date yesterday.
Yeah. So were you offered any deals to change your plea to a guilty plea? Lots. And how did you feel about that? And were you ever tempted to think just get
Never
this over
tempted.
with? Never tempted.
I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. And the more the lower the deals got, like in the money, because it went from like this huge amount of money, like over £500,000, to like 40 grand. And I was thinking like, doesn't the other 540 matter anymore? Like, it makes no sense. First they were going to drop this charge, then they were going to reduce that charge. Then it was like they were like, I just found it astonishing. And I'll be honest, the more deals I got offered, the more angry I got, the more incensed. I absolutely got incensed. And my brief said at the last deal offer, and this was interesting because I had no idea. He told me afterwards. He said at my last deal offer, he said, when you said no to that, He said it was so powerful. He said because he would have said 10 out of 10 defendants who'd been in my situation for as long as I have would have took the plea, like at that point. And I said, well, they must have been guilty then, but I wasn't. Why would I do that? I was very clear they could drop it to 50p, like on one charge and 50p. Like, I'm not pleading guilty to anything because I didn't do anything wrong. And it was more personal than that, Ed, because I did everything right. Yeah. It wasn't like I didn't know and then hadn't done it, said I didn't do anything wrong. I knew what had happened and I stayed and fixed everything, but I did everything right. So it's very personal. Like, how dare you? Like, how dare you accuse me of this? Yeah. So yeah. So for me, there was never a hesitation. The deals got more and more ludicrous as the deal offers went on. The prosecutor was leaving, so he was very keen. In one of his emails, he said he wanted to, and I quote, dot his I's before his departure.
I loved your response to that. I read that yesterday in your letter.
Yeah, I was like, dot your I's. I'm not an I to dot. Of course, you want to dot the I because you don't want anybody to see what you've been up to. Because you know what's going to happen, and that is exactly what happened when he left.
So when you were originally charged with the sort of 550. Was it outlined what possible sentences that if you were convicted at trial, like what you would be facing? So
I read this. as I said, I'm an academic myself, so I read up. I went to the sentencing guidelines. I saw that I learned that all about how financial crime is done, and it's like this box of table, and I saw where the money I was sitting was at, and I saw it was around the 5-year mark. So I knew. Yeah, it was around 5 years was like the average, but you sort of 3 to 7 is roughly for the benchmark of the amount of money that I was alleged to have taken. I would have rather gone to prison guilty. I would have rather gone to prison not guilty, rather being found guilty, and knowing that I hadn't done it, than ever took a plea deal.
So just to contextualize these deals, so if it was dropped down to 40k, they're going to
drop all the charges apart from one. So the first deal offer was, so I think I got this wrong actually when I first wrote it on my Twitter because I read up on it the other day. So the first deal offer was to keep charges 2 and 3, but reduce charge 1, which was like 311k, to 68k. Now, that particular 311k was made up of 2 parts. It was made up of a period from 2008 when I first opened my business in November 2008 till February 2011. And then it went from 11 to 14. So there was 2 separate parts. The 68 grand that they were trying to ask me to plead guilty for, actually, when I first opened my business, everybody was self-employed. They all had contracts for services. It was very clear on my terms of business. It was the nature of my business at the time. What happened was the legislation in the SI industry changed in 2010, and ACS came in, approved contractor status, and everyone had to be PAYE. You wanted to be not a rogue trader. If you wanted to be a good employer, that's what you did. So there came a point that we became PAYE. The 68 grand that they tried to get me to plead guilty from was from the bit when people were self-employed. So it wasn't even owed to them. So, and my solicitors and the forensic accountant made a really valid point in my case. The forensic accountant was like A1, and he made a very valid point that just because I've paid out, like, for example, 10 grand in wages, it could be 500 people that have earned 100 quid each, as opposed to, so they wouldn't, because a lot of the people I employed at that point when we first opened, it was like students doing 5 hours at football and stuff like that. So they either didn't pay tax because they were students. Those days, students, I don't know if they still don't, but those days they didn't. Or they might have not been over the threshold. So do you get what I mean? So I didn't even think of that. It was the forensic accountant that thought of it. So the maths was very the maths fluctuated throughout. Like, it was like they pulled numbers out of the sky. So I used to make a joke that have they got an abacus and they just throw it, and wherever the beats it, that's the number of the day. Let's go with that number. So
what would have been the
first deal they would use? They wanted to lose the bit that actually was the bit that had gone wrong from 11 to 14. The bit that had actually gone wrong with the dodgy person who used to work for me. They were going to drop that. And then they wanted me to plead guilty to something that was never owed in the first place. So I was like, well, that's not happening. Then they came back. Deal 2 was they were going to drop charges 1 and 2 completely, which was all the business fraud. But the reason they wanted to do that is because they knew that they'd destroyed all my records and they were going to lose on an abusive process. They knew. So they had nothing. So they knew they had no leg to stand on for the business because it was easily proved. So the last tax was the fraud by false representation was to do with tax credits. They tried to say that I'd been overpaid by £49,000 over this 10-year period. But I'd never not declared anything ever in my life. I've only ever had the income from my business or child benefit from my children. I've never been on benefits. So I've never not declared anything. I hand in my P60 like everybody else. And the childcare, the tax credits I had were often not for me. They weren't monetary. They were like childcare stuff, because my kids were little. So they went to like nurseries, childminders, things like that. So it was childcare elements that they were trying to. So we were like, what? So, and my solicitor went through all of my, so there's another document I can forward you after this, which is the third deal offer, my solicitor's response to that deal offer. And that's basically asking for the case review. It's a phenomenal letter. Like Kieran, my solicitor, was absolutely, like, I can't even articulate what a good solicitor he was.
So in terms of if you were when you were offered the 40k deal,
so that was the last deal offer.
How long in prison would that result in?
I wouldn't have even gone to prison. I would have
gone to prison. So
I probably would have got like 100 hours community service or something. They said after 7 years, I might not have even got a sentence, even a suspended or something. But my brief said in the letter, I can forward it to you afterwards. My brief's very clear that I wouldn't have gone to prison, and because he starts talking about my community work that I'm doing already, saying she's already does more in 1 week than you would ever give her anyway. Like.
Yeah.
So I've been doing charity work for like 20 years. It's not a new thing. Like, I haven't just started doing it since I had a case. I've been doing this forever. So it's who I am as a person. So if I pled guilty, I'm not going to plead guilty to something I didn't do. Like, I'm not. No. And the audacity of what they accused me of as well. Like, the audacity. It was very personal to me because it was very personal what happened. I took that very personally, what my old accountant had done. Exceptionally badly, because you feel incredibly stupid to be duped by a con man, and that's all he was ultimately. And that took a lot of time to process, to then fix everything, do everything right, and then go through this for 7 years. It's like, it's been an interesting journey.
So you keep saying no to the deals,
all the deals.
stand by your innocence. And yesterday, 100%. What date was it yesterday? The 20th yesterday. The 20th of November was supposed to be your first day of your trial, but we don't get there. What happened to say that you didn't get to go to trial? What happened? So
my solicitor sent in a response to their third deal offer, but he knew that the original prosecutor was leaving and he wanted the case to be reviewed by the fresh team coming in. So he deliberately waited. He's very good, my solicitor. He knew what he was doing, even though the time limits frustrated me. We knew what was going on with the prosecutor. So as far as Kieran was concerned, it needed to be reviewed by a fresh team. There was no point sending that response in whilst that guy was still there, because it wouldn't have happened. So he waited for the new team, only maybe a few weeks. There wasn't like a long time. It wasn't like a long, but a strategy thing, legal strategy, I'm sure. He's the expert, and he really was the expert. And he waited a few weeks. So he sent it into a fresh team. A new prosecuting team took over the case. And within a couple of weeks, they acknowledged, he rang to say, like, have you got it? Blah, blah, blah. They said, we've got it. We're going to review it and get back to you. On average, working with the previous guy, responses tended to take 6 to 8 weeks minimum, 3 months maybe, if I was lucky, like to a response to anything, unless it was something in court or whatever. And even that, they were late. They were told to summons things all the time, and they never produced anything on time. And they didn't do anything the judges told them to do at any point.
No.
But when he sent that letter in, it's a answer to the third deal offer, my response to that, and no. And it's basically an 11-page report, brilliant letter, detailing all the reasons why this prosecution doesn't stand, all the evidential failures, all about the abusive process, all this kind of stuff. And then, we got an acknowledgement saying a couple of weeks later to say that they got it, they were going to review it. And then 4 weeks later, so very fast for the CPS, and a month ahead of time, which is quite interesting because a lot of people have told me I was quite fortunate. Sometimes they leave it till the morning of the event and stuff like that. A month before, I was at work teaching 36 kids how to make pencil tops, all girls, screaming everywhere. It was chaos. And I got a call out the blue, and my solicitor was so emotional. He was like, almost like, oh, Krista. And I said, what's happened? He was like, oh, So Sam's not been well, and I've had a message from Chambers that he's not going to be able to attend next month. So I was like, oh, so it's not even the response, because I saw it. I'd been waiting for this call.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh, it's not even that. It's about Sam. So I kind of went like this to the wall next to me, and I was like, oh, all right. My head kind of, my whole body just sort of went, oh, again. And then he said, but it's all right. We don't need him because like he was like almost screaming. Like I felt his emotion. I couldn't speak. I was hyperventilating. I think I started howling. The kids all came running around the corner saying, "You all right? You all right, Missy? You all right?" Because obviously I was just a heap on the floor. I literally fell on the floor, slid that old adage, like you slide down the wall. I've actually done it now. Like I literally slid down the wall. So yeah. And then I had to again get on and go to work. There's 36 kids there. So I was just like, so I made a couple of calls, and then my battery died. And I think that was probably good, because my battery died. I rang the kids, told the kids, and then I had to go and deliver an art session for 36 kids. So yeah, I didn't pick back up on it for about an hour and a half, 2 hours later when I got home. So imagine having that in your brain, and you just can't tell anyone, you can't do anything. My brain was exploding. I didn't believe it. And then they said I had to go back to court the following week on the 18th. So I knew I was going back to court then. I think I put a tweet out that night to say, I obviously couldn't say what had happened. My solicitor was very clear not to go public with them. He knew I had my account, and he was very supportive of it, in fact. But we had a deal breaker that I would never do anything that could compromise the case. And he was like, just don't say a word to anybody. He said, you absolutely deserve to. And he swore, he was like, I'm so sorry that you didn't get to have your moment tonight. He said, but just wait. And to be honest with you, I don't think I believed it until yesterday anyway, because even when we went to court the following week, it was still a fiasco. It was still the prosecution, like the original prosecutor was trying to get into the Zoom meeting, and the judge was shouting at her, and the new prosecuting team was like, no, she's not allowed in this meeting. I'm the new messenger boy now. And my barrister, I didn't realize, because I was crying. I thought the judge was shouting at me, because I thought, oh my God, they're going to make me go again. It's not going to happen. I want to wait for this woman, this letter that hasn't been uploaded. So I was starting to like hyperventilate, and the judge was just shouting. So I didn't watch. But afterwards, my family told me whilst all this was going on, and I was like on the desk, my barrister was watching it all, sitting back laughing. It was just, they said when they saw that, they knew I was all right. But I missed all of it. It was quite scary, even till like the last seconds. Like even letting me go was a scary experience, because the judge was shouting at them that I even had to come back to court, that she said I shouldn't have had to come back, and how much more are you going to do to this woman? Like, the new, in fairness, I'll be honest, the new prosecuting guy, he was very polite, almost apologetic in his tone. Like, to me, he wasn't rude to me at all. A completely different demeanor from what I've dealt with for the last 7 years.
So what was their official reason then for not? So they obviously submit no case to answer. So
the case,
do they have to explain that? Because
the judge made them.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Yeah, she made them. She was very upset. She made them, and a letter hadn't been uploaded. I think that was supposed to have been uploaded. Maybe that would have detailed what they were. I don't know. But the poor new prosecutor, I felt quite sorry for him, actually, even though he was the prosecutor, because he was just the messenger, and it was a real don't shoot the messenger, and he absolutely got annihilated. I felt really sorry for him. He felt the wrath of this recorder. But charge 1 was no evidence, evidential failures. So that was the main one, the whole cheating the public revenue. The second charge, something like it was found to be an unlawful charge, something like that. Okay. I think, and don't quote me on this, but something, I don't know if I actually need to find this out myself. I need to get like the actual answer to this. But I think it was like something like they tried to do the same charge again in a different way, kind of thing. Right,
okay, I see, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. That was the money laundering thing. It was, the charge didn't stand, basically. That was what they said. And charge 3, they said that, so there's a bit in the thing that I'm going to send you when my solicitor says something about the tax credits, saying, how is this criminal? Why isn't it civil? And if it's not civil, we want to see this and how you got there and yeah. And it was something to do with that basically they'd made it criminal and it shouldn't have been criminal, because behind the scenes I've been paying back 20 grand of tax credit since 2020. So I've already had this overpayment that they've already, and I've got no way of proving that it's an overpayment, but they're making me pay it. There's no paperwork anyway to say that I owe this money. There's no actual black and white, but if I don't pay them, they take 40% of my wages.
Yeah.
I've got no choice but to pay it back, but I've got no evidence that I owe them it at all.
Okay.
So yeah, so they tried to do me for it again, basically. You know, like they've tried to do it for me criminally, but I'm already dealing with it. Like,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's been resolved if you're making the regular monthly payments and not missing one. It's
well,
being
if they
taken care of.
listed the evidence properly, they would have read it like several times.
So
but they knew that. They knew that. It was all in the news. They knew all that. They knew my accountant was a rogue trader. They found out he'd never got a qualification in his life. It's in their own notes. But they let him go and prosecuted me. The person that stayed and paid it all back. Like, I'm not a legal expert, you are, but does it make any sense?
It does not. It does not make any sense at all. One thing that really jumped out from your letter that I read was that there was manipulation of evidence in terms of sort of WhatsApp messages sort of being spliced together to kind of form a narrative. Is my understanding of that correct?
That and their own witness statements. So they didn't have any witnesses. They had 3 witness statements from people that I knew, but their witness statements didn't say anything apart from that Krista did not do the accounts. So it is like they were invalid. So the only people that they had, because I was a good boss, so everybody loved me and everybody knew that I didn't do the accounts. It was like he had his own office in our office. Like everyone went to see him. Like it's not something you can lie about. Do you get what I mean? Like, we had 400 staff. Like they all knew who this guy was. Yeah. So when the evidence came through, that their own witness statements, namely particularly this woman that I'd worked with at HMRC, her evidence particularly was all like, so we saw a statement that she wrote in 2017, which was full of praise for me, saying that I'd done nothing wrong. She hadn't looked at this because of that, and the accountants were doing this and everything was right. But by the version, you get the 4th version later, in 2020, whenever it is, when they present the evidence, it was like astounding how much they'd taken out, reworded. But we had the original. Like, okay. And then with WhatsApp convos, it was like a party trick. So they put like, there was a quote. This is like the most ludicrous example. There was like, they took like 2 words of a conversation, like number exhibit, and it said like fuck HMRC was one of them, and I'm going to use that as the example here because I feel like your audience will appreciate this when I tell them actually what the conversation was. And it's listed that I've said this, my number at this time, like I hate HMRC. When you read the thread, I've paid out 28 grand of payroll, 64 grand to HMRC that day, and what I actually said is, fuck you lot, fuck the kids, fuck HMRC, I'm going to a pub, That's what I said. It's been a long day. I was in the group chat with my staff. It was a boss like, oh, it's been a long day, I paid a lot of money out moment. But you took the 2 words, like I go around saying, fuck HMRC, I'm not going to pay them. That's just one example. I feel like there was a particular conversation about P60s. So they tried to make it look like I was giving out, printing P60s for people. Oh, just come in and see me and I'll print you one. But at the time, so they've cut in bits of conversations, but they messed up because in the middle of it, there's like another conversation from my friend talking about my son's birthday in the middle of this. So when we put this together, it was 3 separate conversations that they'd cut into one, and we put the whole 3 conversations into one. You know, like, it was astonishing. There was one excerpt that said, get the cash or bring the cash, something like that. Just those 3 words. I was ordering a kebab and telling my friend, bring the money, like bring the cash. Literally a kebab. I've done a kebab. That was it. There's another one. I'm dropping you the equipment now. Like, what do you think I've got? Like a printing press? I don't understand. I was dropping her an iPad to use at work for check-ins at the Troxy. You know, like, So what they did was astonishing. But I had all the real conversations. And if I didn't, the people who I'd messaged did. There was literally only 1 or 2 that I couldn't piece together, which was quite cool.
Did the prosecution get pulled up for this at all? Has there been any accountability or any acceptance that this is what they've done?
No, so we filed an abusive process. So ahead of the first 2 trial dates, because they got deferred, the abusive process didn't get filed. I didn't understand why you can only file an abusive process 14 days before the actual trial is due to start. So you have to have the PTR, and then 2 weeks, no more than 2 weeks before the trial date is due to start. That's when you file this abusive process. And to me, that makes no sense, because if you've got to file an abusive process, just file it quickly and you can eliminate cases. Like, if they're all waiting for 2 weeks before, Like, no wonder the backlog's like that. It's ridiculous. So anyway, that was quite frustrating. So at the third trial date, which was October 2022, it was supposed to be on Halloween, October the 31st, 2022. The abuser process went in 2 weeks before, bang on date. On that abuser process, they were held accountable. There was the thing about delays. There was a lot about the destruction of my property because they'd authorised my liquidator to destroy all my business records. A week after I did my pleas in Crown, a week after I did my pleas. So literally 2 days after the Christmas break, I think they authorised it on like January the 6th, 2021. And I contacted my, do you know, it wasn't even me that thought of contacting my liquidator. It was my business partner. She said, look, let's go up to Southend and go and access the records and we can pull out all that stuff. And I was like, oh yeah. My head was spinning from it all. So I contacted my liquidator and that's how we found out. So there was a lot about that stuff. Nobody made us even aware that they were getting destroyed. Nobody even asked us. They had their own conversation between the two of them and everything was in an incinerator. So that was a big part of it. Abusive conduct, malicious prosecution, all those kind of things, tampering of evidence, you know, stuff like that. Manipulation of evidence was another reason in the abusive process. So this argument went in 2 weeks before, so mid-October 2022. I think it went in about the 21st of October 2022. And then on the 29th of October, to the Friday before, I was on another community project because I'm always at work, living my best life. This time I was up and ladder painting a Jamaica flag for a Black History Month project. And I had a team of whole volunteers around me and my barrister rang me and said they've pulled out. Apparently they're not available. They're on a murder case. And he said he lost the plot because he said she knew she had the case. I said, it's because we filed the abuser process. They don't want to come to court. I knew what it was. He was like, well, it could be that. Either way, she's not. He was really cross that what they did because we were all set to go. Also for me, I'd done, at that point, I'd probably done 8 months, really intensive work with my brief and barrister. So I work full time. I've got a family. And so all my legal stuff was going on evenings, weekends.
Yeah.
Probably the 6 weeks leading up to that trial were particularly heavy. I had this massive community project going on for Black History Month that I had to deliver for the council and the people and the NHS. And then I had, alongside that, I was doing legal stuff around the clock, reading this, checking that, like being trial ready, I guess. I suppose that's the rush before the showtime, if that makes sense, what we would call showtime in my old industry. So that period for me was very intense. And then when I got that call, I think I took that adjournment the worse than any other date that's been postponed. And by then I should have been used to it. I've been to court by myself last year, the barrister strikes. On a serious note, that took my breath away. Because to me at that point, if you know you're going to pull out at that point, you know you've got to throw the towel in. Just do the right thing. Like, why make somebody wait another 14 months? It just makes no sense. It's just a waste. Apart from the common sense factor, Ed, it makes no sense for resources, services, like the backlog. You're just putting added pressure, unnecessary pressure on a system that's already caving. You know, like it just makes no sense to me. So I took that very badly. I was quite bereft, I think is the word probably, after that one, because I was so ready. And then all again, it's not. But then you get past Christmas, a few months progresses, and here we are sort of later on in time. Yeah. Eventually a new prosecutor got there and it got reviewed and the right thing happened. So I maintain that I was right all along about the abuser process.
Absolutely, it certainly sounds it. You mentioned your Twitter handle at the Secret Defendant. What gave you the inspiration to start this and kind of like journalizing almost the parts of your journey that you were allowed to speak about?
My mental health, I think.
Did it help?
100%. It was my platform. Having an anonymous platform. I'm amazed I kept it anonymous for so long. I'm very popular, like, and everyone knows me in real life. So I'm absolutely astonished. Everyone was astonished that they had no idea that I had this thing. Only my immediate family knew that I had it. And I didn't add any of them, so they couldn't be associated with it at all. When I first tweeted, I remember saying to my friend, you know, I have these crazy ideas, the entrepreneur in me, or this business brain of mine. I said, but you never know, like somebody might hear it. I don't know what's going to happen. I said, but there's no defendants talking. At the time, it was only really SB talking, Secret Barrister and Crime Girl. I'd followed both of them for quite a long time. I liked how they talked. And obviously now, because I'm in the justice system, I had a vested interest in the stuff they were tweeting. Whereas before, I just followed them because I found their tweets relevant and interesting. Few people like those two. That's a handful. But I'd sort of had them on my personal Twitter anyway. So I'd had this interest, but now I'm in this situation. So I've got like a whole new level of interest now. So for me, it was a mental health thing. I had questions, a lot of questions. The time that I opened it, my charges hadn't arrived. So I was in this period of limbo. I'd been on RUI for this long. And what had happened was I'd swapped briefs. So when my business closed, I didn't have the money to pay for a first brief. So he had to drop me. He didn't do legal aid cases. No great loss. It's all right. We got on, but we got on very well. He's a nice bloke, but wasn't the brief for me for this case personally. Yeah. I think I got the right brief. So I'd spoken to Hodge Jones and Allen's at that point. A lady, actually, it was funny, and it wasn't even the brief I've got. It was a lady, and I'd really liked her. And I went to Hodge Jones and Allen's because their strapline on their website said reputation protection, and that to me was what this was about more than any alligator. It was never about the money, all of that. It was about how dare you, how dare you. So that's what attracted me to them. And then people spoke really highly of them. So I had them ready to go, but they'd advised me that until the charges actually came, they can't do anything because I can't pay them. There's nothing they can actually do.
No,
I might not need them unless the charges come.
Yeah.
So I was in this period of limbo. So I knew at that point I was being charged, but I'd had sort of 6 months of waiting, 4 months of waiting for them and nothing.
Yeah.
So I went on to, that was hence why. And I messaged Secret Barrister and I said, like, I'm a defendant and do you mind if I use this name? Like, I just want you to know. And they were very polite and said, no, go for it. Good idea. I think it's a good idea. Never had any communication with them. They've sort of retweeted me once or twice, but there's never been any communication sort of behind the scenes. But yeah, they were very polite about it. And I just thought, let me try. And I think at first it was like a hill to vent from, like a hill to vent from my thoughts, my emotions. I very quickly learned, don't talk about my case because it can compromise it. So initial things that I might have said, I learned within sort of 2-3 weeks how to handle the account, if that makes sense. And so I got the best out. And I'll be really honest, I've never been trolled. I've never had anyone be horrible to me, which is quite surprising. I'm accused of a crime. I've had nothing but support on there. And it's definitely, like, you can't ring your brief at 11 o'clock at night if you've got a question when you're reading legal papers after work late at night, but Twitter will answer it straight away for you. So I found initially it was for like guidance and resources and getting questions answered, but very quickly it became my mental health escape, I think, and kept me sane. It definitely kept me sane. I was very grateful for the support I've had on Twitter. Very grateful.
It's great to hear.
Well, yeah, because you hear such negative stuff about Twitter all the time, right, and social media. So it's good to hear that it can actually be really positive. It was positive for me and my own mental health. And then the support I got was like an added bonus, like I didn't expect it at all. I was quite overwhelmed by it, to be honest with you, especially when the day that I won my case and my Twitter went insane.
Yeah.
Insanity.
Just one final question before we wrap up, maybe two. So a number of academics and people who comment on the sort of justice system would say that we have a system that is designed purely to produce guilty pleas, not necessarily to test the evidence at court, not to give you a fair trial, but purely this production line, a conveyor belt to produce guilty pleas. In your experience, would you agree with that?
100%, 100%, 150%. Even at the end of this experience, I went on Google just like an ordinary, just like I have done throughout this case, because I'm but a bit mortal, especially before I had Twitter. And I kind of Googled what support is in place for defendants that are found not guilty. I put in the search bar, I've been found not guilty in court. What support is there? There's none. Every government document about going to court is all designed around guilty pleas. There's nothing to say if you get found guilty, you can do this or this happens, or there's nothing. There's nothing. There's no resources. There's no support. There's no services. There's no recompense. We don't get the same recompense as people that are wrongly convicted. So we have to go to prison to get our money back. Like, okay.
And even then, you're not guaranteed to.
But even then, you're not guaranteed it. I mean, the way they've handled Malkinson, poor Mr. Malkinson, is atrocious. So, like, I feel like the law needs to change. Like, and I said this in my letter, and I really stand by it. Like, you teach your kids, if you're wrong, you say sorry, and you put your hands up and you say sorry. It's always better to tell the truth, right? And I feel like if people, especially with the government situation, how we are now as a country, not just our system, that there's a lot of broken systems, not just the CJS. I feel like accountability and apology will go a long way with people to rebuilding relationships. Like, it's very sad to me, and I've learned through my own experience. And even though I've got justice in the end, I did get justice. But what is it really justice if you've gone through something you should never have gone through in the first place? There's that old swings and roundabout thing. So I feel like I feel like there's nothing wrong with saying you're sorry, you got it wrong. You know, like everyone makes mistakes. It's okay. We know you make mistakes. It's the fact that you don't ever apologize and acknowledge anything. And that's wrong. They want people to vote in a government, but how are you going to vote in a government that you can't trust or see any accountability from? Like, you can't. So I don't think Alex Chalk will reply to me. I live in hope, but I might get a generic reply if I'm lucky. If I get more than that, I'll be really grateful. But I feel like it's important. Like, he's covered so many subjects, but he hasn't mentioned defendants. When you talk about the list, when people talk about court stuff, it goes victims, witnesses, defendants. Very few bring defendants in the same suite. Like,
it's because we have a presumption of guilt and not a presumption
100%.
of innocence.
And that's so wrong. Like,
I tell my students that you'd be unelectable if you say we're going to put defendants at the forefront of the system when they should be toward the forefront of the system, because they're the ones that has the most to lose. And what is currently based on is a mere allegation that is about to be tested. There's just a distinct lack of understanding of how the system is supposed to work.
100%. I feel like the system, when you read the morals and the foundations and the justice delayed is justice denied stuff, when you go back into the history books, it's everything it's not. What it was built on, it's absolutely not that at this point anymore. And I think that that's really wrong. I think that even if you get to the point, so it shouldn't be like that the whole way through the journey. But when you get to the point that I'm at, where I've fought my battle fair and square, I've shown you up for your flaws, I've won, I've been found not guilty, my name is clear, that I should be entitled to some sort of something, not just, it's almost as if you're, and I don't mean something necessarily in monetary terms, I mean an apology or whatever, accountability, whatever. Like, it's almost like I'm supposed to skip off, oh yeah, I'm not guilty, thank you. Like, hold on.
Cheers.
Thanks. Cheers. And you're like left a bit like, okay, like I've just been hit over the head with a baseball bat for the last 7 years consistently, and I'm supposed to be grateful. Like, so again, that takes you right back. If I'm supposed to be grateful, then that emphasizes your point you just made on the presumption of guilt. Because how can somebody not guilty be expected to be grateful that they've been found not guilty?
Yeah.
Like, the audacity and ludicrousness of that sentence alone is not lost on either of us. I can see it in your face.
It really isn't. So one last one. What's next? Aside from hopefully looking for an apology, that hopefully Alex will get back to you. But
healing, definitely. Finding a new normal. So I've started a new job, which is really full on. I've got real life going on simultaneously. So that's nice. But legally, I'm going to see what happens, to be honest with you. I've written a book, which everybody knows anyway, so that's going to be finished soon. So that's going to be finishing up by Christmas, hopefully, over the Christmas period, definitely.
When's that going to be out?
Well, when I find a publisher or agent that wants to take it on, I've got to write a synopsis to be passed to an agent, so that's a start. And then after that, I've been thinking about starting some sort of support group, maybe a monthly safe space online for women defendants particularly. I feel like I know I needed it, somewhere to talk. And the couple of women that I've been speaking to privately via DM and stuff, we're all in different situations, but we're all in the court system for whatever reason. And I think it's just something that women could need. Like, I'm sure men need it too. I'm not saying it's not gender.
No, absolutely no.
At all. But for me personally, I think that might be something I'm thinking about doing. I've had a really positive response to it. Like, people were really interested in doing it. So we might start like a monthly safe space to start talking online, and that could become something. This journey has been bonkers, Ed. So to be honest with you, I know it's weird because I know it's the end of the journey, but I also know it's not the end of the journey, if that makes sense. I'm just now tackling a new bit, a new part of the journey in a new way, if that makes sense. So I'm delighted I got my justice, and I'm very grateful. Like, I'm very grateful, but I'm equally not, because I should never have gone through it in the first place just as much. I shouldn't have to feel grateful that I got found not guilty of something I never did in the first place.
Exactly.
Every time I say it, it makes me laugh because I just can't believe the audacity of it. So journey wise, I think that's probably where I'm thinking of going, something for the new year. And I'll just see where I go. Hopefully, Mr. Chalk will take the time to read my letter and acknowledge it. I saw that he tweeted 1 million reforms for people today, but I haven't even had a comment. But in honesty, nor has the shadow justice minister either. I've had no acknowledgement for either of them. I am but a mere mortal. But I do think that defendants need to be considered more in the legal picture. I think more defendants need to be spoken to, maybe people like me could do more public. It's not me necessarily me, but people like me could do things like public speaking and stuff like that, because people need to understand at legal conferences and stuff, because I think solicitors and legal people that work in the legal trade, it's good for them to remember through people like me why they do their job, to put the guilty away and the innocent are set free. Like, that is ultimately what they're supposed to care about, as what they do. And I think that in this climate, maybe that could go a long way with people, just reminding them, but also because systems and policies and changes and processes, systems, policies and processes, so we're talking at a strategy level now, policy level, they need to consider us as well, because without us, there's no victims in court. We're the people in the dock. There's barristers, judges, all these people have not got a job if it wasn't for people like us in the dock. So that doesn't mean we're all guilty. So we're very much a key part of this system, sadly. Without us, there are no crimes, like, or alleged crimes, should I say. And I feel like defendants' voices should definitely be more considered, because we have got rights, and it would be nice to see them adhered to. I think that's very important.
I couldn't agree with you more around the respect of defendants' rights in the trial process and what the various stages mean.
Yeah, I'm quite interested in being in that part of the journey, if that makes sense. So like at a research level, like feeding in level, that kind of thing. That's probably where my interest would lie more than, I'm going to be on an angry bandwagon until I get. I'm not on an angry bandwagon until I get my apology. I know I didn't do it in the first place. It's fine. I'm sure an apology will come one day. It's fine.
Hopefully,
one day. You never know.
But I'm really grateful. I'm really happy that justice was done in the end, despite the fact it took 7 and a bit years to get
normal
there.
Now, sadly, it's normal now. That's even worse. Like when I first started, I remember everybody on Twitter going, 4 years, and now we're at 7 years. Like, everyone's like 7 years. So I know that my open letter, I know that legal experts across the land were like, okay, this happens to everybody every day. Like a poor woman, but it happens to everybody every day. Is that all? I know worse. And
it doesn't mean it should be tolerated, though.
Exactly. That's my point.
Should not be tolerated.
If there's no change, how will it ever get better? And I do think Alex Chalk is quite proactive. I've got to be honest. Like, he's the most proactive I've seen in the 8 that I've been under, in my term.
8.
But yeah, 8 justice ministers in. He's my 8th since 2000. I had to Google it because I tried to remember. I got to 6. I got to 6, but there was a couple I'd forgotten about. Truss. Who knew that Truss was a justice minister? She was so good, I didn't even know she was one.
But thank you so much for sharing your story, and the frankness of the talk as well has been great. So
thank you. You can only tell the truth, right? And I didn't cry, so we're winning. I waited a month, so I was mentally and emotionally. This is me on a normal day. I'm not actually a crying wreck all the time. So yeah. And on a serious note, like with the academic stuff, if I can feed in or be part of, so I've got a master's myself and a BA ons as well. So if I can feed in with anything interesting like you're doing or whatever, like I would be interested from a research perspective and stuff like that. I'll definitely be interested. So
we'll definitely keep in touch.
No problem. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Krista. You take
care. Have a lovely evening. Yeah, see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that was extremely interesting. I'd like to thank Krista, the secret defendant, for her talk. I thought it was rather illuminating to see the various stages of the criminal justice process in England, in England and Wales. And I think Krista showed great resolve in maintaining rather steadfastly her innocence throughout her 7.5 years from sort of arrest to eventual having no case to answer from the Crown Prosecution Service. I hope you found the talk interesting, and thanks again to the secret defendant for talking to us in such a candid manner and an open manner. And please share the video widely.